At the dawn of the year 1000, Europe was a vastly different place from what we know today. While most medieval Europeans feared sailing beyond the known horizon, believing in tales of sea monsters and the edge of a flat world, one civilization had already mastered the treacherous northern seas, the Vikings. These Norse seafarers had established a maritime empire stretching from their Scandinavian homeland to Iceland and eventually to Greenland. Greenland, that vast ice-covered land, was not merely a frozen frontier, but a crucial stepping stone in Viking exploration. Erik the Red had established the first Norse settlements there around 985 CE, creating a society that would serve as the launching point for even greater discoveries. The settlements in Greenland were a testament to Viking resilience, surviving in one of the world's harshest environments through a combination of farming, hunting, and trading. The Norse settlements in Greenland were strategically positioned along the southwestern coast, where fjords cut deep into the land, providing natural harbors and slightly more hospitable conditions. The eastern settlement, the larger of the two main colonies, was home to approximately 5,000 people at its peak, living in hundreds of farms spread across the fjords. The western settlement, smaller but equally important, was established further north. The Viking Age was at its zenith during this period. Their longships, technological marvels of their time, were uniquely suited for both deep-sea navigation and coastal exploration. These vessels, with their shallow drafts and remarkable maneuverability, could navigate both open seas and rivers, making them perfect for exploration. The Vikings had developed sophisticated navigation techniques using the sun, stars, and natural phenomena like the migration of birds and whales to guide their way across the vast ocean. The political landscape of the North Atlantic was equally complex. While mainland Europe was fragmented into feudal kingdoms, the Norse world operated under a different system. The Vikings had established a network of settlements connected by sea routes, with their own form of democratic governance called the Thing system. Iceland, already a thriving Norse colony, had established the world's first parliament, the Althing, in 930 CE. It was in this context that a young Viking named Leif Erikson, raised in Greenland's harsh but promising environment, would embark on a journey that would take him beyond the known world. The son of Erik the Red, Leif grew up hearing tales of strange lands glimpsed to the west by merchants blown off course. These stories, combined with the Viking spirit of exploration and the practical need for new resources, would soon lead to one of history's most remarkable yet overlooked discoveries. The stage was set for an extraordinary achievement: the European discovery of North America, nearly half a millennium before Columbus would make his famous journey. This was a time when the Viking expansion had reached its geographical limits in Europe, and their gaze naturally turned westward into the unknown expanse of the Atlantic Ocean. What lay ahead would change our understanding of medieval exploration and rewrite the history of European contact with the Americas. Did you know that America was discovered almost 500 years before Columbus? If you want to discover this fascinating story, leave your like and subscribe to the channel The Medieval Archives so you don't miss any historical adventure. The saga of the North Atlantic explorations revolves around several remarkable individuals, each playing a vital role in this epic tale of discovery. At the center of our story stands Leif Erikson, born around 970 CE. A man whose legacy would forever change the map of the known world. Raised in the harsh environment of Greenland, Leif grew up learning the art of seamanship and leadership from an early age. His physical prowess was matched by his diplomatic skills, and he earned the nickname Leif the Lucky due to his uncanny ability to survive perilous situations. His father, Erik the Red, was already a legend in his own right. Born in Norway, Erik was forced to leave his homeland due to a series of violent disputes, a common fate for many Vikings of his time. After being banished from Iceland for manslaughter, Erik discovered and colonized Greenland, showing remarkable leadership skills by establishing the first permanent European settlements there. Despite his fierce reputation, suggested by his nickname, the Red, which referred either to his hair color or his violent temper, Erik was also a skilled navigator and charismatic leader who successfully led hundreds of settlers to create a new life in Greenland. Among the most intriguing figures in Leif's life was Thurka, a German captured as a child and raised in Erik the Red's household. Thurka became much more than a servant. He was Leif's mentor and teacher, introducing him to broader European perspectives and knowledge. His expertise in agriculture and fermentation would later prove crucial during the exploration of Vinland, where he famously identified the wild grapes that gave the region its name. Thurka represents the often overlooked multicultural aspects of Viking society. Thorvald, Leif's brother, was perhaps the most tragic figure in this story. Inspired by his brother's discoveries, he led his own expedition to Vinland around 1004 CE. While he shared his brother's adventurous spirit, he lacked Leif's diplomatic touch. His confrontational approach with the indigenous peoples, whom the Norse called Skrælings, ultimately led to his death in a skirmish, making him one of the first known Europeans to be killed in North America. Freydis, Leif's half-sister, emerges from the Sagas as one of the most complex and formidable characters in the entire Vinland narrative. Described as fiercely independent and extraordinarily brave, she participated in several expeditions to Vinland. According to the Sagas, during one attack by indigenous peoples, Freydis, despite being pregnant, stood her ground and confronted the attackers when the men began to flee. She demonstrated both the strength and ruthlessness that characterized Viking leadership, though later sagas also tell of her involvement in darker episodes involving betrayal and murder in the struggle for control of the Vinland settlements. These key figures, bound together by blood, ambition, and the harsh realities of their time, would shape not only the course of Norse exploration, but also write the first chapter in the European discovery of North America. Their complex relationships, personal ambitions, and individual characteristics created a dynamic that would influence the success and ultimate fate of the Norse ventures into the New World. Through their stories, we gain insight into not just the events of their time, but the very nature of Viking society and the human drive for exploration and conquest. At the heart of Leif Erikson's story lies a profound narrative about human courage and the eternal quest to push beyond known boundaries. This isn't merely a tale of geographical exploration, but rather a complex web of personal, spiritual, and societal challenges that defined an era of tremendous change in the Norse world. Living in the shadow of Erik the Red presented Leif with an immense psychological burden. His father had already achieved legendary status as the founder of the Greenland settlements, and the weight of these expectations lay heavily on Leif's shoulders. Erik had carved his place in history through brute force and determination, establishing a reputation that was both a blessing and a curse for his son. Leif had to find his own path to greatness, one that would distinguish him from his father's legacy while still honoring the family name. The religious tensions of the era added another layer of complexity to Leif's journey. The turn of the millennium marked a crucial period of religious transformation in the Norse world. While Erik the Red remained steadfastly loyal to the old gods, Leif became fascinated with Christianity during a visit to Norway, where King Olaf Tryggvason converted him. This conversion created a deep personal conflict, as Leif had to navigate between his new faith and the deeply ingrained Norse traditions that had shaped his upbringing. The spiritual divide between father and son mirrored the larger religious transformation sweeping through Viking society, where ancient practices clashed with the expanding influence of Christianity. The pressure to prove himself as a leader manifested in unique ways. Unlike his father, who had established his authority through force, Leif had to demonstrate a different kind of leadership. His era demanded diplomatic skills as much as martial prowess. The challenges of leading expeditions into unknown waters required not only navigation skills, but also the ability to maintain crew morale in the face of uncertainty. Leif had to balance the aggressive Viking traditions with a more measured approach, particularly when dealing with the indigenous peoples they encountered in the new lands. The exploration of uncharted waters served as both a physical and metaphorical journey. Every league sailed westward was a step into the unknown, challenging the limits of Viking nautical technology and human courage. The Norse ships, while advanced for their time, were still vulnerable to the Atlantic's fierce storms and treacherous ice. The crew faced not only the real dangers of the sea, but also their own fears and superstitions about what lay beyond the known world. These challenges converged to create a crucible that would test and define Leif's character. His response to these trials would determine not only his personal legacy, but also the fate of Norse expansion into the Western lands. The saga of Leif Erikson thus becomes more than a story of discovery. It transforms into a testament to human adaptability and the courage to forge new paths, both literally and figuratively. The historical record suggests that Leif's approach to these challenges was remarkably successful. He managed to maintain his crew's loyalty, establish peaceful first contacts with indigenous peoples, and navigate the complex political and religious landscapes of his time. His ability to balance tradition with innovation, force with diplomacy, and personal ambition with collective responsibility marked him as a different kind of leader from his father, yet equally effective in his own right. Through these multiple layers of conflict and challenge, Leif's story resonates across the centuries as a powerful reminder of how individual courage and adaptability can shape the course of history. His journey represents not just a physical expedition into unknown territories, but a transformative experience that would help bridge the old world and the new, both geographically and culturally. Life in 10th century Greenland was a constant battle for survival, where every day presented new challenges in one of Earth's most unforgiving environments. The Norse settlers had to adapt their traditional ways to this harsh reality, developing a unique society that merged ancient Viking customs with innovative survival strategies. The education of a young Viking like Leif Erikson began early in life. From the age of 5, children were already learning essential survival skills. Young boys would start by mastering basic weapons handling, initially with wooden swords and shields. By 7, they were expected to help with farm work, learning to tend livestock and assist in the endless tasks required to maintain a Greenland homestead. Girls learned equally vital skills, including food preservation, textile making, and the medicinal properties of plants, knowledge that could mean the difference between life and death during the long winter months. Navigation was a crucial part of Viking education, particularly for those destined to become leaders. Young Vikings learned to read the stars using a primitive solar compass called a solarstein. They studied wind patterns, ocean currents, and the behavior of birds and marine life. Cloud formations became vital navigation tools, and young sailors learned to detect the presence of land by observing changes in wave patterns and the color of the sky. This knowledge was passed down through practical experience, with young Vikings joining fishing expeditions from an early age. The sagas played a fundamental role in Viking society, serving as both entertainment and educational tools. During the long winter nights, families would gather in the great halls, where skilled storytellers would recount tales of great deeds, successful voyages, and legendary heroes. These oral traditions were more than mere stories. They contained vital information about navigation routes, weather patterns, and survival techniques, wrapped in compelling narratives that made them easy to remember and pass on to future generations. The social structure in Norse Greenland was hierarchical, but more fluid than in contemporary European societies. At the top, were the wealthy landowners, who possessed the best farms and controlled most resources. Below them were free farmers who owned smaller plots of land, followed by craftsmen and traders. At the bottom were thralls, or slaves, though slavery was less common in Greenland than in other Viking territories due to the harsh conditions requiring everyone to work together for survival. Political decisions were made through the Thing system, a form of early democratic assembly where free men could voice their opinions and participate in decision-making. These gatherings were also crucial social events, where news was shared, marriages were arranged, and trade deals were struck. The Thing meetings helped maintain social cohesion and ensure the survival of the community through collective decision-making. The role of women in Greenland's Norse society was notably different from much of medieval Europe. While men were often away on hunting or trading expeditions, women managed the farms and households with considerable authority. They controlled the distribution of food stores, managed domestic production, and in many cases engaged in trade. Women could own property, inherit land, and even initiate divorce, rights that were almost unheard of in medieval Christian Europe. Religion played a complex role in daily life, especially during Leif Erikson's time, as Christianity began to influence traditional Norse practices. The old gods were still honored through rituals and festivals, but Christian practices gradually became integrated into daily life. This religious transition reflected the Vikings' practical approach to survival. They were willing to adopt new ideas and practices if they proved beneficial to the community. Did you imagine that Vikings had such advanced technology for their time? Tell us in the comments what has surprised you the most so far. Don't forget to leave your like and subscribe to The Medieval Archives. The story of Leif Erikson's discovery of North America unfolds like a great saga, filled with unexpected turns and remarkable achievements. The journey began not as a planned expedition, but as an accidental discovery that would change the course of history. In 999 CE, while sailing from Norway to Greenland, Leif's ship was blown off course by fierce storms. Rather than fighting against the winds, he made the crucial decision to follow them, exhibiting the adaptability that would become his trademark. During this unplanned detour, Leif and his crew first encountered a rocky, barren land they named Helluland, likely modern-day Baffin Island. Instead of immediately turning back, Leif's curiosity and instinct for exploration led him to continue southward. They next discovered a forested land they called Markland, probably present-day Labrador, with resources that would be invaluable to the timber-starved Greenland colonies. But the most significant discovery was yet to come. The accidental journey led them to a land so abundant that it seemed almost mythical to the Norse explorers. This was Vinland, named for the wild grapes or berries found growing there. It was Leif's German mentor, Thirke, who first identified these fruits, causing great excitement among the crew. This land, likely located in modern-day Newfoundland, offered everything the Vikings could desire: fertile soil, abundant timber, rich fishing grounds, and a climate milder than Greenland's harsh environment. Inspired by this accidental discovery, Leif organized a much more ambitious and carefully planned expedition. He spent months gathering resources and selecting his crew, choosing men skilled in various crafts needed for establishing a settlement. The preparation was meticulous, with ships loaded with essential tools, livestock, and supplies. Leif also carefully studied the sailing patterns and currents noted during his first voyage, creating crude but effective maps. The challenges of this planned expedition were enormous. The Vikings had to navigate through treacherous waters filled with icebergs, cope with sudden storms, and maintain their course without modern navigational tools. They relied on the sun compass, the migration patterns of birds, and the color of the water to guide them. The journey tested not only their seamanship, but also their resolve as they ventured further from known waters than any Europeans of their time. The establishment of the first settlement in Vinland was a remarkable achievement. archaeological evidence from Lens aux Meadows confirms the Norse Sagas' accounts of these settlements. The Vikings built their traditional longhouses but adapted their construction techniques to use local materials. They established a base for further exploration and resource gathering, complete with a forge for ironworking and facilities for boat repair. The impact of these discoveries on Norse society was profound. Word of the new lands spread throughout the Viking world, inspiring others to follow in Leif's wake. His brother Thorvald led an expedition that ended in tragedy when he was killed in a conflict with the indigenous people. Thorfinn Karlsefni organized the largest attempt at colonization, bringing 160 settlers and staying for 3 years. Even Leif's sister Freydis led her own expedition, though it ended in controversy and bloodshed. However, the Norse presence in North America would not last. Several factors contributed to the abandonment of these settlements. The distance from Greenland and Iceland made supply lines difficult to maintain. The relatively small number of settlers made them vulnerable to both natural hardships and conflicts with indigenous peoples, whom they called Skraelings. The political and economic changes in Scandinavia meant less support for these distant outposts. Perhaps most significantly, the Norse settlers faced increasing hostility from the indigenous populations. Unlike later European colonizers, the Vikings lacked the technological advantages that would later prove decisive in colonial encounters. The initial peaceful trading relationships deteriorated into violent confrontations, making permanent settlement increasingly difficult. By 1010 CE, the Vinland settlement was abandoned, though Norse voyages to harvest timber from Markland continued for several centuries. The settlement's failure marked a turning point in Viking expansion, signaling the beginning of the end of their era of exploration. Yet the achievement itself remains remarkable. Leif Erikson and his followers had crossed the Atlantic, established settlements in North America, and created detailed knowledge of lands that Europeans wouldn't rediscover for nearly 500 years. This chapter in history serves as a reminder that great discoveries often come from a combination of accident, courage, and the wisdom to seize unexpected opportunities. The story of Leif's discoveries and the subsequent attempts at colonization represents both the height of Viking maritime achievement and a poignant might have been in the history of European-American contact. The preservation of Leif Erikson's remarkable journey was made possible through the unique Norse tradition of saga-telling. The primary accounts of his discoveries come from two main sources, the Saga of Erik the Red and the Saga of the Greenlanders, both written in Iceland during the 13th century. These sagas, while compiled some 200 years after the events they describe, were based on oral traditions passed down through generations with remarkable accuracy. The Norse people had developed sophisticated memory techniques and storytelling conventions that allowed them to preserve historical details with surprising precision. The saga tradition was more than mere storytelling. It represented a complex system of historical record-keeping that combined factual events with literary elements. Professional storytellers, known as sagamen, were highly respected members of society who underwent years of training to memorize these elaborate tales. They employed specific metrical patterns and mnemonic devices to ensure accuracy in transmission. While modern historians once dismissed sagas as mere folklore, archaeological discoveries have repeatedly confirmed many of their geographical and technical details, lending credibility to their historical content. Viking naval technology represented the pinnacle of medieval shipbuilding expertise. The legendary longship was a masterpiece of engineering, combining shallow draft with remarkable seaworthiness. These vessels were built using a clinker construction technique where planks overlapped each other, creating a light but incredibly strong hull. The ships were flexible enough to ride over waves rather than cutting through them, making them capable of crossing vast ocean stretches. The distinctive keel design allowed for both stability in rough seas and the ability to navigate shallow waters, crucial for exploration and coastal raiding. The most innovative feature of Viking ships was their unique steering system. Rather than a fixed rudder, they used a steering oar mounted on the starboard, literally steering board side. This arrangement allowed for quick directional changes and superior maneuverability. The ships also featured a revolutionary square sail design that could be adjusted quickly to changing wind conditions. The sail technology, combined with rowing capabilities, gave Viking ships unmatched versatility for their time. Norse navigation techniques were remarkably sophisticated despite the absence of magnetic compasses. The Vikings developed a solar compass, known as a solarstein, which used a crystal of Iceland spar to locate the sun even on cloudy days. This crystalline stone has the property of polarizing light, allowing navigators to determine the sun's position through cloud cover. They also mastered the use of a primitive sundial-like device called a solar shadow board, which helped them maintain consistent latitude while sailing east or west. Star navigation was equally important, particularly during the long summer days in northern latitudes. The Vikings identified specific star patterns and developed techniques to use the North Star, Polaris, for navigation. They also relied on natural signs, such as the migration patterns of whales and birds, the behavior of ocean currents, and the presence of specific types of clouds that indicated nearby land. This combination of technological tools and natural observation allowed them to undertake lengthy ocean voyages with remarkable accuracy. The religious aspect of Leif Erikson's story reflects a fascinating period of transition in Norse society. His conversion to Christianity around 999 CE under the influence of Norwegian King Olaf Tryggvason marked a significant turning point. However, like many Vikings of his time, Leif's Christianity was likely syncretic, blending new Christian beliefs with traditional Norse religious practices. This religious dualism is evident in the archaeological record of Viking settlements, where Christian crosses are often found alongside Thor's hammers and other pagan symbols. The practical nature of Viking society meant that this religious transition was often more pragmatic than dogmatic. Christians and pagans could coexist within the same family and community, as evidenced by Leif's relationship with his staunchly pagan father, Erik the Red. This religious flexibility may have contributed to Leif's diplomatic success, allowing him to navigate between different belief systems and cultures effectively. The intellectual achievements of Viking society extended beyond navigation and shipbuilding. They developed sophisticated systems of law and governance, created complex trading networks, and maintained detailed genealogical records. Their runic writing system, while primarily used for short inscriptions, demonstrated their literacy and intellectual sophistication. The Vikings also made significant contributions to metallurgy, particularly in swordmaking, where they developed advanced techniques for creating pattern-welded steel. This rich cultural and intellectual heritage provided the foundation for Leif Erikson's successful exploration of North America. The combination of advanced technology, sophisticated navigation techniques, and a flexible worldview that could accommodate both old and new beliefs made possible what was perhaps the greatest maritime achievement of the medieval period. The preservation of this achievement through the saga tradition ensures that we can still appreciate the full scope of this remarkable accomplishment today. The encounter between the Norse explorers and the indigenous peoples of North America, whom they called Skraelings, marked one of history's most significant early contacts between Europeans and Native Americans. The term Skraeling initially applied to the Thule people, ancestors of modern Inuit, and later to other indigenous groups the Vikings encountered. These first meetings were characterized by a complex mix of curiosity, trade, and ultimately, conflict. According to the Sagas, Initial encounters were peaceful and centered around trade. The Norse offered red cloth, dairy products, and metal tools, which fascinated the native peoples who had never seen such items. In return, the Skraelings traded valuable furs, particularly those of the Arctic fox and polar bear, along with exotic goods like walrus ivory. These early exchanges demonstrated the potential for mutually beneficial relationships between the two cultures. However, cultural misunderstandings and resource competition soon led to tensions. One particularly notable incident occurred when a group of Skraelings approached the Norse settlement to trade. A bull owned by the Vikings broke free and charged at the natives, causing panic. This incident, though seemingly minor, marked a turning point in relations, leading to increased suspicion and hostility on both sides. The Vikings' technological advantages were less pronounced than those of later European explorers. While they possessed iron weapons and tools, they lacked gunpowder and faced indigenous peoples who were well adapted to their environment and skilled in warfare. The native people's superior numbers and knowledge of the terrain often proved decisive in confrontations. The sagas describe several violent encounters, including the battle that led to Thorvald Eriksson's death, where native forces used tactics unfamiliar to the Vikings, such as attacking from multiple directions using small boats. Christianity played a complex role in these explorations. Leif Erikson's conversion to Christianity shortly before his famous voyage influenced how the Norse approached colonization. Unlike earlier Viking raids in Europe, there was a greater emphasis on settlement and trade rather than plunder. Christian missionaries were among the travelers to the new lands, though their efforts to spread their faith were limited by the short-lived nature of the settlements. The influence of Christianity also manifested in how the Norse documented their discoveries. The sagas, written in a Christian Iceland, often portrayed the explorations through a Christian lens, emphasizing divine providence in the discoveries and interpreting events within a Christian framework. This religious perspective helped preserve the stories, but also colored how they were recorded and transmitted. The impact of these Norse voyages on world navigation was profound, though largely unrecognized until centuries later. The Vikings' successful Atlantic crossings demonstrated that long-distance ocean navigation was possible with medieval technology. They developed and refined techniques for open ocean sailing that would not be matched until the age of exploration. Their routes, following the stepping stones of Iceland and Greenland, proved that systematic exploration could lead to significant discoveries. The Norse expeditions also established important principles of colonial settlement that would later influence European expansion. They demonstrated the importance of establishing supply lines, maintaining diplomatic relations with indigenous peoples, and adapting to local conditions. Their experience showed both the possibilities and challenges of establishing distant colonies, lessons that would become crucial during later European colonization efforts. These interactions left lasting marks on both societies. Archaeological evidence suggests that some Native American groups incorporated Norse technological elements into their own cultures, particularly in metalworking. The Vikings, in turn, gained new knowledge about navigation, novel resources, and survival techniques in unfamiliar environments. Though the Norse settlements in North America were ultimately abandoned, the cultural exchange that occurred during this period represented one of history's earliest documented instances of sustained contact between European and Native American peoples. The legacy of these interactions extends beyond their immediate historical context. They demonstrated that cross-cultural contact could lead to both productive exchange and devastating conflict, a pattern that would repeat throughout the age of exploration. The Norse experience in North America served as a precursor to later European colonization efforts, though their story offers a unique perspective on how such encounters might have developed differently under other circumstances. The rediscovery of Leif Erikson's achievements stands as one of archaeology's most dramatic validations of historical texts. For centuries, the Norse Sagas accounts of Vinland were dismissed as myths or exaggerations by many historians. However, in 1960, Norwegian archaeologists Helge and Anne Steen Ingstad made a discovery that would revolutionize our understanding of medieval history. Their excavation at Lance aux Meadows in Newfoundland provided irrefutable evidence of Norse presence in North America centuries before Columbus. Lance aux Meadows represents a watershed moment in historical archaeology. The site revealed 8 Norse buildings constructed in the typical Viking style, with timbered frames and turf walls. The structures included living quarters, workshops, and a forge where iron nails essential for shipbuilding were produced. Carbon dating of artifacts placed the settlement's occupation around 1000 CE, perfectly aligning with the time frame described in the sagas. The discovery of a bronze cloak pin, identical to those found in Norse settlements in Greenland, and a spindle whorl used for weaving, provided definitive proof of Viking presence. What makes the Lance aux Meadows site particularly significant is its role as a gateway settlement. Archaeological evidence suggests it served as a base camp for further exploration and resource gathering, rather than a permanent colony. The presence of butternuts and butternut wood, which grew only as far north as New Brunswick, indicates that the Vikings explored much farther south than the settlement itself. This matches the saga's descriptions of multiple expeditions launched from a northern base camp. The question of why such a momentous discovery was forgotten by history is complex and fascinating. Several factors contributed to this historical amnesia. First, the Norse settlements were relatively short-lived, lasting only a few years. The small scale of their presence, compared to later European colonization, meant fewer physical traces remained. Additionally, the political and economic decline of Norse Greenland in the 14th and 15th centuries severed the connection between the North American settlements and European memory. The medieval European worldview also played a crucial role in this forgetting. The Norse discoveries occurred before Europe had developed the institutional and intellectual framework to fully appreciate their significance. Without printing presses or widespread literacy, knowledge of these explorations remained largely confined to Scandinavian oral traditions. When Columbus made his voyage in 1492, European society was better prepared to document and disseminate information about geographical discoveries. Leif Erikson's importance to the history of exploration extends far beyond being merely first. His expeditions demonstrated several crucial principles of successful exploration that would be rediscovered centuries later. The Vikings' use of stepping stone exploration, establishing bases in Iceland and Greenland before reaching North America, demonstrated the importance of systematic approaches to discovery. Their ability to adapt their ships and navigation techniques to different environmental conditions set important precedents for later maritime exploration. The Viking achievement also challenges our traditional narratives about technological prerequisites for oceanic exploration. Using what we would now consider primitive technology, they accomplished what European sailors 4 centuries later would achieve, only with more advanced instruments. This forces us to reconsider our assumptions about the capabilities of ancient peoples and the nature of human innovation. Modern archaeology continues to reveal new aspects of the Norse presence in North America. Recent discoveries using satellite technology have identified potential new Norse sites in Newfoundland and beyond. These findings suggest that the Viking presence in North America may have been more extensive than previously thought, opening new chapters in this fascinating historical narrative. The legacy of Leif Erikson and the Norse explorers remains relevant today. Their story reminds us that history is often more complex and nuanced than traditional narratives suggest. The Viking discovery of America demonstrates how significant historical achievements can be forgotten and rediscovered, challenging us to remain open to revising our understanding of the past as new evidence emerges. If you've been amazed by this incredible story, don't forget to like the video, share it with your friends, and subscribe to the Medieval Archives. Leave a comment telling us which aspect of Leif Erikson's story surprised you the most. Until our next historical adventure. The rediscovery of Leif Erikson's achievements continues to inspire new generations of historians, archaeologists, and adventurers, reminding us that there are always new discoveries to be made about our past and new lessons to be learned from those who dared to explore the unknown.